Hello, my loves. We were sitting in this nice little patch of dappled sunlight because it's been a long time since we've done a wrap up and we have so many books to talk about. Not only have I not done a wrap up since this year started, we still haven't talked about November and December's books. So we have a lot of things to cover. Grab yourself a snack, grab yourself a juice, a cup of tea, and let's get started. Starting with November, we read 10 books because Goodreads Choice Awards reading was in full swing. But let's start with the non-Goodreads Choice Awards related books because we haven't talked about a few of them. The first one is Beware of Chicken. It took me a really long time to read this book. It was kind of like my emotional support book whenever I didn't have other things to read. It's like if Stardew Valley was a book. It's a really, really sweet, like, farm sim book. This guy wakes up in this monk's body with magical abilities. He's from our world, and he just kind of decides to leave this place that he's in, and he goes and starts a farm and has this really cozy, quiet life, marries this girl from the village, and is just like, A, learning about this magic system, which is really interesting, B, accidentally making some of his farm animals sentient, which is hilarious, and having a really nice, quiet life. I loved every single page of this. I think it's beautiful. There's a whole series. I will be continuing, and I encourage you to do the same. Then I read Daughter of No Worlds, which is a very dark, romantasy situation. This is, I would say, a really good entry point into the romantasy genre. I am not a huge romantasy girly. I really enjoyed Fourth Wing, didn't love the second book in that series, not sure if I'm going to read the third one, but Daughter of No Worlds, I enjoyed. It was a really good escapist book for me. Every time there was something bad going on in my life, I would just go for a really long walk to process. We had a stressful couple of months there. Everything is much better now, but I liked this book because I didn't have to think too hard about it. I could just go into this world and vibe. Our main character has a lot of bad things happen to her, and the amount of torture and slavery and stress that is going on in this book will make your problems seem less in comparison in like a good way, and also has lots of escapist romance and magic, and the trading sequences in here I really, really enjoy. She kind of flees the situation that she's in and she joins this magic order, and then she ends up going and fighting for them. So we're following all of the twists and turns that go along with that. Next, I read An Academy of Liars, which everyone hated except for me. I give it 5 stars. I loved it. I don't understand why everyone hates this book. I ate it up. I ate up every single aspect of it. I love Alexis Henderson's writing. I think she writes horror so well, and although this is not a horror book, has a lot of horror elements in it. I don't know what to tell you. Is the relationship in here what I want them to date in real life? No. Do I think they're good for each other? No. Did I still eat up every single second of it? Absolutely. I liked this a lot. I don't understand how people love 9000 Hellbent and don't like An Academy for Liars, because to me, they're the same type of vibe and I eat them up equally. I love all of them. I really, really enjoyed watching our main character go to this secret magic academy in Savannah, Georgia. I really enjoyed learning about this magic system. It's very similar to the magic system in Lexicon, if you've read that, where you are using the power of persuasion. There's elevators to other times and places. I really enjoyed everything about it, and I don't want to hear any hate about it. I'd continue reading this series, absolutely. Next, we have The Tainted Cup, which I think I am in the popular opinion saying that I love this. I also give it 5 stars. This is a fantasy murder mystery situation. The fantasy world, the magic system, everything that we are uncovering and exploring is so interesting. And the murder mystery is also incredibly interesting. To have a way to kill someone that is that interesting without being disgusting, it's gross, but it's not. I feel like sometimes in order to get people to pay attention, we just go so far in the gross factor in order to get people to go, oh, something interesting is happening here. This book didn't need to do that. I thought it was so restrained in the over-the-topness. Like it felt really, really nostalgic to the murder mystery genre. It felt like Sherlock Holmes, but it was also really fresh and new, and I loved it. I'm really excited that the second book is coming out this year. I'm so excited to dive back into this world. We're getting a really interesting magic system that's based on these leviathans, these monsters that are constantly threatening. We have politics that are going on, there are influential families. We have a really quirky investigator, and we're actually, our main character is her assistant. And so it's really, really a fresh take on the murder mystery genre and an incredible fantasy world. So recommend for lovers of murder mystery and lovers of fantasy. Oh, then I read Murder Road by Simone St. James. This is now into the Goodreads Choice Awards content. I liked it, didn't love it. I would recommend to anyone who likes cozy books. Like if you're a cozy mystery type person, if you're a cozy horror type person, I would really recommend Murder Road. I believe I read this for the horror category, and it is not that much horror in my opinion. We're following these newlyweds on their honeymoon, and they are experiencing some horror, some supernatural things going on, and they are trying to investigate and figure out what's at the bottom of it. I enjoyed it more than I thought that I would, but not enough that I would read anything that was blurbed as being similar to it. I'll put it that way. But I would recommend for lovers of cozy mystery and cozy horror. The Bullet Swallower was a big surprise to me. I really, really enjoyed it, and I really want Dan, my fiance, to read it. I think it would be right up his alley if you're looking for a book to recommend to someone in your life who likes westerns. I think this one is perfect. It is super, super interesting. We're following different generations of this family. It gets a little bit supernatural. This family basically is kind of cursed because they've done some really bad things, and so this supernatural character has marked this baby for hell. He's really conflicted about this because he doesn't believe that the baby should be marked for hell, because how can a baby be marked for hell? And so that's like his job, is to mark people for hell and to take them when they're ready. And so he's kind of like following this family, this character specifically, this baby, as it grows up, and then further generations, future generations of this family, we're learning about their deeds. And there's a really interesting, this character is so interesting because he does really good things and he does really bad things, where it's just this big conversations about morality and good versus evil and fate versus being in charge of your life. It's just really, really exceptional. And it's set at the backdrop, the time period we're in Mexico, we're in southwestern United States. It's so, so good. Highly recommend for any lovers of westerns. Then I read Maybe This Time, which is a very cute little romance book. I read it for the audiobook category and enjoyed it. It's the story of a girl who ends up stuck in the future, and she is talking to this guy from the past through a phone call, and he's interacting with both versions of her, past version of her and present version of her. Well, I guess technically past version is future version. Anyways, they have really sweet romance. I like that their jobs are really at the forefront. She's a teacher. He's also a teacher. He's the coach, the PE teacher. And so they are like talking about how they help students process things and learn from things through like their perspective jobs that they have. I liked their little romance. I thought it was cute, but once again, not something that's going to be in like my top 10 romances of all time. Yours for the Taking is, I'm so conflicted on how to review this, because although I really liked the conversations and the thought processes that came out of this, I don't know if I enjoyed the act of reading it that much. The actual book, I didn't feel like executed super well, but I really, really loved the idea and I really loved the conversations that came out of it. So we are in the future, the apocalypse is happening. We have these things called the insides. There's like a city built in a dome, basically. And there's a lot of conversations in here about gender and who is a woman and who is not a woman, and a lot of kind of like lean in conversations. If you've read Lean In, there's a character who's very, very similar to that book's ethos. I just really, really enjoyed how this book explored feminism from a critical perspective, because I really loved doing that in school and college and really critiquing and always trying to be better and have more inclusive feminism and more intersectional feminism. And this book was really, to me, kind of like a warning shot of what happens if our feminism is not inclusive and how it can actually become oppressive. Similar tone and vibes, I would say, to like an Emily St. John Mandel or like a Julia Armfeld, but in my opinion, didn't execute quite right, but I believe it was a debut and I would totally read from this author in the future. A lot of people said that this felt a little bit too YA for them. I would agree with that. But yeah, would totally read from that author again. You overheated, so you had a timeout in the freezer. But we can now move on to The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. This is not my first Rachel Hawkins. I read Reckless Girls by this author, and I think I did enjoy The Heiress more. We're following this family, they're very wealthy, and this heiress has just died. It's not the typical story of like who's gonna inherit the money, because we're actually quite a bit past that, we know who's going to inherit all of the money. It's a very slow thriller where a lot of the reveals are things that have happened in the past. We are now in this present moment kind of figuring everything out. I enjoyed it a lot, but it's not like the typical fast-paced thriller where a lot of things are happening in the moment. It's a lot of uncovering things and figuring out what happened in the past, but it's all centered on this very wealthy family in North Carolina. I enjoyed it and I would recommend. And the last book I read in November is A Love Song for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. Once again, not my first Tia Williams. I think I did enjoy the first book I read by Tia Williams more than this one, but I was pleasantly surprised by this one. I did really, really enjoy it. Of course, the other book I've read by this author is 7 Days in June. Loved that book so much. Not your typical romance, and I would say A Love Song for Ricky Wilde is very much more so your typical romance. It is supernatural, which is cute. There's a little time travel aspect in this, and I did really enjoy it. I really loved how cheesy it was. It really leaned into the cheese. I think A Love Song for Ricky Wilde was so serious and so of this world that it was really refreshing, and I actually really enjoy that Tia Williams went the complete different way with A Love Song for Ricky Wilde and gave us this fantastical, lovey-dovey, super cheesy romance moment. Okay, moving on to the 12 books that I read in December. Once again, a lot more Goodreads Choice Words content in here. I will link all of the videos below if you want to go and hear more in-depth thoughts and everything. But let's chat about The Spell Shop, which I read for Romantasy. This is a really, really sweet, cozy fantasy romantasy. Would highly recommend to anyone who loves cozy fantasy. We're following this woman as she's fleeing this library as it is being burnt down. She carries with her spell books, which are illegal for her to have outside of the library. It's illegal for anyone to practice magic. And she also has with her her trusty spider plant, sentient spider plant sidekick, which is very cute and sweet. I really love this book. She's moving back to her small town that she grew up in, so moving into her parents' old house that has been abandoned for a long time, getting to know people that she may have known when she was a child, and also new people. There's a lot of every single character, especially our main character, assumes that people have the best intentions and does everything with love and assumes that other people will give that back to her. It ends up working out for her. And it's a really sweet story, but I did find myself rolling my eyes at it a little bit, thinking like, is that how this would actually play out in real life? I don't know. Overall, I enjoyed the tenderness that this book had. I think it was a nice breath of fresh air and a lot of escapism, really, reading this book. Everything worked out the way that it would most beneficially work out for our characters. Then I read Welcome to the Hyunam Dong Bookshop. I loved this one. I really, really, really loved this one. It was escapist in a very different way. The Spell Shop is very cozy, slow down in a drop everything and go live on an island type of way. And this book, Welcome to the Hyunam Dong Bookshop, is escapist in a very different way, like a very slow look at what your reality is and your current job, and talking a lot about purpose and what it means to be good at something. It was a very slow story in the way that a lot of Japanese and Korean literature that I've read is slow. If you read and enjoyed things like There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job, I think you'll really, really enjoy this one. And I would highly, highly recommend it for people who are reading that book for similar reasons. You're talking about jobs and purpose and work and having an idea of work while you're in school and having things that you're working towards and what happens when that isn't what you thought it would be, what happens when you're not able to achieve that. Conversations like that. Then I read American Scary, which is a good nonfiction, but is very dense. So I would say if you haven't read a lot of horror, if you haven't watched a lot of horror, this is not like a good entry point into it. This is for like the horror fanatic who's read everything, who's watched everything, who really wants someone to nerd out with them about it. That's what this book is perfect for. It's walking you through American horror from the beginning of America, before America was America, all the way until present day. Touched on a lot of my favorite horror. A lot of stuff went over my head because although I do love horror, I have not read or watched all of it. So I enjoyed it, but I think I could get more out of it if I read it later in life or if I had waited until I had read more horror to dive into it. Then I read The Third Gilmore Girl, and I was not excited to read this. I read this for the memoir category, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought that I would. And I would say if you've been putting off reading this, if you haven't picked it up because you're not a Gilmore Girls fan, I also have not watched all of Gilmore Girls. I never watched it growing up. I watched a little bit of it as an adult, but really enjoyed Kelly Bishop talking about her start in ballet. I really, really loved those conversations, and it was super, super interesting to follow that part of her life. And to be honest with you, there's not a whole ton of Gilmore Girls content in here. So if you're a lover of memoir and have been staying away from this one because you weren't sure how much of it was just going to be Gilmore Girls, it's not a ton of Gilmore Girls. And I found it to be quite enjoyable. Something I didn't love and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on is How to Tell When We Will Die. This book was a bit more than I thought it was going to be. I thought it could have been edited a bit more heavily. A lot of the essays I thought had really, really interesting points, but there were a lot of essays that were kind of saying the same thing. Points were repeated over and over. This is a book on pain, disability, and doom. There's also in here a lot of sexually explicit content, which I was not expecting and did not really enjoy reading. That's all I'm going to say on that. I think if you are someone who likes to read things on disability and pain, I think there are a lot of really interesting things in here. My favorite essay was A Letter to a Young Doctor. I really enjoyed that. I would pick this book up specifically to read that essay, and then kind of pick up other things where you will. If you're someone who likes this topic, wants to read more on this topic, I would say this is one that you should read an essay of kind of every now and then instead of all the way through at once. Okay, then I picked up Voyage of the Damned, which I also did not love. This read really YA to me. I just didn't like it. It's a murder mystery fantasy, and The Tainted Cup was such a good murder mystery fantasy. This one really just did not work for me. We have a lot of magical children of varying ages. Some of them are in their 20s, some of them are, our youngest is like 6 years old, who was the best character. I loved her. I just didn't feel it to be super compelling. I think if I had read this as a teenager, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Lots to say about mental health and depression in here, as well as like taking over the family responsibilities. Lots of intrigue and murder mystery things to find out, but not my favorite that I read. The Teller of Small Fortunes is a very sweet, cozy fantasy. This is about a teller of small fortunes. She doesn't tell big fortunes, she tells small ones. This was our first book club book for my membership for our book club. I really loved reading this with channel members. Loved the conversations in here about relationships and romance without actually having a central romance for our main character to go through. I also really enjoyed the road trip aspect of this. If you're going on a road trip, I think this would be the perfect book because we are traveling all around to have this caravan go and tell small fortunes, and also we're looking for someone we meet on the road. He's lost his daughter, so we're also looking for her. There's a cat that we pick up along the way. It's a very sweet story, lots of adventuring, as well as lots of cozier, quieter moments. The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Jelly Clark, I really liked. This was so good. I loved the kind of like time aspect of this, and actually I wish the author had leaned a little bit more into that because we're just one day and one night. There's a really rich magic system here to uncover. We're following these assassins. They are dead. They have these contracts and it's supposed to be really righteous, and there's something that is amiss and there are things to figure out, and we're kind of using this day and this night to uncover what's going on. There's lots of fighting, and I would love to see this built into a movie. I think that movie would be so good, and I am desperate to see it in film form. So hopefully that happens, and then we can all read the book and watch the movie together. Then I read Look in the Mirror by Catherine Studman, one of my favorite thriller authors. I don't want to tell you too much about this one because it is just a puzzle box to uncover and figure out. We're following some different perspectives, people who are showing up to these really nice houses. One of them, her father built the house or had the house, she inherited the house. She's showing up trying to figure out what's going on. There's a locked room. The other one's a nanny who's showing up to this house, and she's supposed to stay there, and also a locked room is there and she's not allowed to go in it. So it's a story that you've heard before but done in a really fresh way. I liked it. I thought there was enough explanation and enough hope at the end to really counteract the non-explanation and dread that you feel at the end as well. Princess Floralinda and the 40 Flight Tower was also adorable. This is by Tamsin Muir, who wrote Gideon the Ninth. I love that series, and this has the same amount of cheek. I love the cheekiness of this author's writing. We have a princess who's in a tower, a very familiar story, once again told in a fresh way. Our princess is waiting for a prince to show up. All of the flights of the tower are filled with creatures that are going to try to kill these princes that this witch has stuck her in this tower for. Our main character meets a fairy, and together they do some very unexpected things. The Six Deaths of the Saint by Alexi Harrow is something I read right at the end of the year. I really love this one. It's super, super short. It's 30 pages. And I loved it. I loved it so much. It has so much to say about love and being chosen and the motives of people and about legacy. I don't want to say anything more because it's only 30 pages, but it is so good. The writing is so poetic and so lyrical. It's done really, really well. Nine Goblins from T. Kingfisher is the last thing that I read this year. It's 139 pages. I wanted to fit some novellas in at the end of the year. I really enjoyed this one. We are following 9 goblins. They're part of the Goblin Army. It's very cheeky. It's dark, like T. Kingfisher's books are always dark. It's also funny, like T. Kingfisher's books are always funny. We've got these 9 goblins serving in this goblin war, and they get separated from the rest of the goblins, and they're alone in elven territory. We're also following an elf veterinarian. It's very T. Kingfisher. If you like T. Kingfisher, you're gonna love this one. Highly recommend. Okay, that was a marathon. We are done with 2024. We can move on to 2025 and the 2 months that we have already gone through somehow. My reading cut in half this year, which is exactly what I wanted to do. I dropped my reading goal from 100 books to 50 books. I am behind on my 50 book goal. I'm okay with that. I'm trying to really be present, focus on editing videos, making good videos for guys, experiencing things, especially here in Costa Rica. So my reading has really dropped a lot, but I have some very lovely things to tell you about. One is When the Crow's Away, which is the second book in the Evenfall Witches B&B series. I really, really love the first one. This one I gave 3 stars. I think it's a second book in a series, and it's got to wrap up some things from the first book to set up things for the third book. I didn't love the conversations that we were having in here. I really, really loved the first book because of how well it did this cozy family, small town, and had a really interesting murder mystery that we were following. It talked a lot about grief and getting over grief and processing grief. And I really loved that. And I think book 2 was kind of like this middle book to distance ourselves from that so we could set up this love story for our main character. And book 3 is my prediction. I didn't love it. I'm not going to say much more on that. I think I will have to let you know how book 3 goes. And if that goes really well, then I will encourage you to continue in the series. Otherwise, this might be one that I just recommend that you read the first book and stop there. Okay, The Eyes of the Best Part by Monica Kim is by far the weirdest thing I have read and the grossest thing I have read this year. It is a wild ride. It has a lot to say about feminism. It has a lot to say about men and women and relationships. We're following a young girl. Her dad has an affair and leaves, and her mother is distraught. Her family is broken, and they are like reeling from this situation. A new man comes into the picture who's very different from their father, and we uncover things about him. Our main character is spending time with a boy at school, and it gets disgusting. Murders occur, eyeballs are eaten. Enough said. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know if I recommend it because I felt sick the entire time I read it, but that was the point. So I will let you determine from that if you want to read it or not. Then I read Elder Race, which was the second book I read for my book club for my members. This is a story about a junior anthropologist on a distant planet, and he is kind of stuck in this tower. He has no contact with his people anymore, and he is like observing these people until one of them kind of shows up on his door and is like, hey, can you help me? He ends up venturing out. There's a lot to say in here about translation because he's trying to tell them that things are science and they're not magic. And because the translation, the words he has at his disposal, they're not hearing that. They're hearing, this is magic. They're like, yeah, I knew it was magic. So it's really, really interesting. Lots of conversations about science versus magic and conversations about what things can be explained, how to have relationships with people when you don't understand each other, the difference between observing and doing and which is better. Lots of conversations about anthropology and the worth versus harm of it. I had a really great time with it. It's only 204 pages. I gave it 4 stars. Something that I gave 5 stars is Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret. This is the third book in the Ernest Cunningham series. I love all of them. The first book, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, is one of my favorite murder mysteries I've ever read. The second book is my favorite sequel to a murder mystery I've ever read, and this is my favorite Christmas special I've ever read. It is so good and so cheeky and breaks the fourth wall and talks direct to reader and is just my favorite series of all time. If you're looking for one recommendation that I would recommend literally everyone because it is so fun, it's so recognizable, it's easy to read, this is a series that I would recommend. You had to have another freezer timeout because you overheated again. But we're at the home stretch now. I'll call back to earlier in our video where we talked briefly about Ninth House and Hellbent. I did indeed read both of them last month. I really enjoyed them. I gave both of them 4 stars. I liked them. I feel like if I had been reading these books, not for the YouTube channel, I might have given them 5 stars. But because I was reading them, especially for a hot takes video, I was really analyzing why people might not love the second book. To be clear, I think the general consensus is everyone loves the first book, doesn't like the second one. When I turned my brain off, I really, really loved it. I loved the story of our main character going to Yale, getting her second chance. She sees ghosts, and she is going to run this secret society that's in charge of all the other magical secret societies and keeps them in check. We're learning about the other secret societies. We're doing rituals. Magic is happening. Things are dark and scary. Huge trigger warnings. Please look up content warnings for these books if you're going to get into them, because there is a lot that's going on. I'm very grateful that I was prepared going in knowing what I was about to see. It's all very fun. We're getting to see everything. There's a little romance situation that's going on, which is very, very slow burn, which I really enjoyed. But when I sit back and critically think about these books, the plot is not how I would prefer it to be. Here's what my consensus is on these books. I wish that book 1, if you've read these books, had ended when Darlington went missing. Darlington is like our main character's mentor that she's supposed to be learning all this stuff from, and he goes missing. And I wish I had gotten to like get my bearings with the school, and because we didn't get a lot of school, with the school and the magic and the secret societies and all of that stuff. And then he goes missing, end of book 1. And then book 2 was all of us trying to figure out, oh my gosh, now I have to run everything, and we're trying to look for him, and we need to know where he is. And then book 2 kind of be what book 2 was, maybe even a little bit condensed. That's what I, in a perfect world, would like out of these books. I'm going to continue reading the series if Lee Bardugo wants to continue writing in it. But those are my thoughts. And the last thing we talk about, something I just finished a few days ago, it's Adrift in Currents, Clean and Clear. I have a whole video that is coming with in-depth thoughts on this, but briefly, I just want to mention that this is my second favorite, I think, maybe even my favorite of the Wayward Children series. I really, really loved it. If you've been like behind on some books, you've been looking for a reason to get back into them, book 10 is so good. And I know that's kind of silly to say, like, oh, like keep reading 3 books to get to book 10. They're novellas. You can read them in a day or 2 if you really want to. I enjoyed this one immensely. We've got turtles. We've got a really interesting in-depth magic system with different water weights. There's a lot of conversations in here about disability. I gave it a solid 5 stars. It is probably tied with Down Among the Sticks and Bones. I'd have to do a reread to know which one I like the best, but I ate this one up. Absolutely loved it. And I think you will too. We're following our main character as she is quite a bit older in her world than I would say a lot of the other characters that we've followed. So I really enjoyed watching her grow up and have all those grown up conversations. And now my camera is about to die. So I'm going to go. That is everything that I read in the winter time. And I'm going to try to do these wrap ups every season. So I will see you in the spring, when the spring is over. It's March. Happy spring. Let me know how your reading has been. Have you read any of these? What were your thoughts? What's your favorite thing that you read in the winter? And I'll see you next week. Bye.